Welcome to Philly Tech Connect podcast, where Philly's tech minds meet. CEOs, developers, dreamers. This is your space. Each week we explore the journeys of tech innovators. Join us and be inspired.
Hey everyone, Dave here with another episode of the Philly Tech Connect podcast. Today I'm speaking with the founders of SetMeld, a company that aims to connect data silos. On my right is Jackson Morgan, the CEO and co-founder of SetMeld, where he leads engineering efforts to develop solutions for data interoperability and precision in large language models. Jackson has built carbon tracking systems for the government of Scotland, supply chain solutions for the Internet of Production Alliance, and decentralized credential systems for MIT's Digital Credentials Consortium, all while advancing open source tools for the linked data ecosystem. Ian, further to my right, is the COO of SetMeld. He's an MBA candidate at the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School of Business and has previously worked at the U.S. Department of State and also Amazon. Guys, how are you doing?
Doing fantastic. How are you doing, David?
I am doing well. Thank you for joining the show. Very interesting bios, background, and sort of product concept that you guys are working on. Tell me a little bit about how you each got into the space of, I guess I'll call it decentralized tech. And I apologize if I say anything incorrect because it's not my field. But tell me a little bit about how you got to where you are today and how you guys met each other.
Yeah, cool. I guess I'll start way back pre-pandemic times. Um, I, I always had in college this idea that the way that we do data is honestly really bad. The fact that data exists in data silos is it really limits your ability to use data that exists. And in order to connect data silos, you have to do all of this integration work, and it's really annoying. So I had in college, I was doing some special projects to try to fix this, and then I found out about this world called the linked data world, and this proposes a solution to data silos, a way to connect data together so that you can utilize insights that don't exist before. So at that time, I quit the job that I had coming out of college. I decided I'm just going to apply to a bunch of academic conferences about linked data. And in going to those academic conferences, if you're familiar with the academic world, there's something called posters. Posters basically get accepted to any conference that you give them to. So I created a poster, got into a few conferences, and at one conference, there's this older gentleman who came up to me and asked, "Where is the location of this event?" And I said, "I'm going to the same room. Follow me." And when he came, when we went into the room, we sat down together, and then the presenters kept speaking to him with deference. I wondered, who is this person? And I eventually found out that this was Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the World Wide Web, who is a huge name in linked data. This goal that we are going to take all the data on the web and turn it into one unified database. So I met him, then he forgot about me, but I was able to network with a lot of his colleagues, and eventually went to work for his company, was the 8th employee for his company called Inrupt, building these linked data solutions. And I eventually left Inrupt and started to build a consulting company around linked data. And I met Ian a few years ago, and Ian has a real great business background to complement the technical background that I'm working with. So Ian, what's your background?
Yeah,
I can talk a bit more about my background too, and sort of how I came into contact with Jackson. So I met Jackson in, I believe, the summer of 2022 in Washington, D.C., when I was living and working there. And although I hadn't been exposed to solid or linked data before, I was able to learn about it from him. And when we first talked about it, it really stuck with me because I was working at the U.S. Department of State, and U.S. Department of State, like most government agencies, like most large established enterprises, they're built on decades and decades of legacy IT infrastructure, where you have all these different data silos across an organization. It's really expensive to share that data. As a line level employee, it's really frustrating because different data is located in different locations. You might not have access to it in a certain amount of time. And you end up creating work products that are subpar. Even though all the resources are there, it's simply an administrative and technical barrier that's preventing you from getting what needs to get out and what needs to get done. So I was just very excited and to learn there was a possible solution. And I eventually left the Department of State and I went to the Wharton School of Business here in Philadelphia, where serendipitously Jackson also had moved to Philadelphia. And the key moment was I was in my valuations class with Professor David Wessels, and he was giving us this story about how data is very important for large organizations, and it's like a moat, right? In businesses, you want moats. You want, established things to keep your business able to compete against its rivals and its competitors. But the irony with data is that this moat actually hurts you. And it's a moat that you dug yourself. So all these large companies like Oracle, SAP, AWS literally benefit from the administrative and technical inconsistencies you have within your organization, and then realizing that what we can do at SetMeld, we actually transcend all those issues and all those problems. And suddenly what can become one of the most expensive line items from an IT standpoint for a large established enterprise, we can reduce the cost drastically and then just even allow even more functionality for the users who deal with this data every single day.
Cool. Sounds great. I have a lot of questions. Hopefully they're not like loaded questions, but I'm curious. It's something I don't know that much about. But it's like I feel like it's a hot topic these days. So data silos, again, the way I'm interpreting this is like a business, like a Facebook, like they have data on me as a user, who my friends are, what pages I visit, and that's something that's data that they own. And I don't necessarily, it's a data about me, but I don't necessarily know any like about it. I don't have access to it, and neither does LinkedIn or some other social media. And what I'm understanding is, if we were to decentralize this data would sort of be out there sort of for everybody, and presumably I would own it in some way. And so I guess where I'm having difficulty kind of understanding is number one, if the data is decentralized, why is that make it that all of a sudden I own my data? Isn't that just actually everybody like owns my data? And do I want everybody to like see my data? You know what I'm saying?
So this is the funny thing. So you are familiar with Web 1.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, right? And a lot of times these days, people talk about Web 3.0, and what they mean is they mean blockchain, or maybe they're talking about distributed hash maps. But there actually was, back in the 2000s, a different Web 3.0. And this is the kind of web that we're talking about, the web of linked data. So erase everything from your mind about blockchain, about distributed hash maps. That's not something that is effective for the modern business world. It's not something that I think is actually effective for individuals beyond just making a bunch of money through pump and dump schemes. The way the original Web 3.0 works is we're going back to the roots. Everyone can choose what server they're putting their data on. You're not necessarily putting it on Facebook server. You're not necessarily putting it on LinkedIn server. It's your server, or perhaps a trusted third party that you decide. But it doesn't matter what the data is. The data storage becomes a utility. It's not bound to the service. So let's use a business example beyond a social media example, healthcare data. There are large siloed databases that contain your healthcare data. They might be on Epic systems, they might be on Cerner systems. These are all big siloed databases that contain healthcare data, and you don't necessarily own your own healthcare data. It's not all in one place. But if we can de-silo things, if each healthcare provider could have a system that they host that brings in data from all of the various legacy systems together into one standardized place, now you can perform queries across that data that can create metrics that you weren't able to get before. So we're not taking data and putting it out into the ether onto a blockchain. It's still a traditional method of storage on a centralized system. It's just that those systems have specifications in the same way that the World Wide Web has a specification for every web browser to be compatible with every web page. These storage systems have specifications to make sure that they're compatible with all the other storage systems that exist, thus bringing all the data into one place, a place that you chose.
Again, I'm going to continue with a line of potentially stupid questions, but it's just sort of how it has to be. If the data is centralized now, and I'm sort of choosing, maybe who's hosting it, where it's hosted, the server, things like that. Who's paying for this? Like, is it me that I pay for it now because now it's I own it and the burden is it, or who is in charge of this centralized data system? Whose responsibility is it to maintain it and pay and things like that?
So one of the big problems that we're addressing isn't necessarily that we're addressing first is a problem that is experienced by large enterprises. So instead of you saying who owns the data, is it me? Let's think about who owns the data at, say, a hospital or a finance institution. It's still the hospital or finance institution. They have budgets, IT budgets, but their IT budgets are ballooned by the fact that there are a bunch of disparate data sources. Some might be on Oracle, some might be on SAP, and now you need to build a bunch of integrations together. You can devote that IT budget towards having a linked data store instead, where now all of your legacy systems can come together inside of a pool of data, and you can now perform queries across it. And on top of that, that pool of data isn't just a generic pool of data. It's not like say like a Snowflake kind of a repository for data. It is a pool of data that has access control. So now different departments inside of your large organization are able to set access control for data, but let you query that data as if it was abstractly one database. Let me make that a little bit less abstract. Let's say I have different government departments. Government of Veterans, the Department of Veterans Affairs, Department of Defense, and DHS. Department of Homeland Security or Department of Health and Human Services. Let's say Department of Health and Human Services. These all have medical data that exists, but all of this medical data is currently siloed. Now, the Department of Defense doesn't want to share absolutely everything with the Department of Veterans Affairs. It only wants to share a portion of it. If you put medical data onto your linked data store, if the Department of Defense puts medical data onto its linked data store and the VA puts medical data onto its linked data store, they can control access control rules. But because the data is linked, now if the Department of Veterans Affairs wants to find out healthcare data that's owned by the Department of Defense, they can just perform a query to get all of the data that they have access to. The data that they don't have access to, the data that the Department of Defense has prevented them from having access to, isn't provided in this query, but it all works seamlessly from a developer perspective. You don't need to spend millions of dollars building integrations between things. It makes it so that the decision to share data is simply a policy decision, not an engineering decision.
And if I can add one more thing too, Dave, just to talk about the costs, like for a large established enterprise, your data storage costs are probably like $200 to $300 million a year. There is a reason that Oracle is a $450 billion market cap company. We really want to change that business model because we think it is taking money away from organizations which can use that capital much more effectively. And what's also really exciting about these linked data stores is that once you make those changes in those original systems that are linked to those linked data stores, That data then is also switched in everything else that's also connected to those linked data stores. So all this data now changes in real time at the end user level without them having to be educated on any new system, any new procedure. So you can keep all these legacy IT systems while just having this sort of data translator tool exist on top of your IT infrastructure.
Okay.
Our goal is we really don't want to screw you over from a data perspective. There is a story. I have a friend who worked for Amazon, and Bezos and Ellison, of course, Jeff Bezos, who was at the time CEO of Amazon, isn't currently CEO of Amazon, and Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, got into a public spat on CNBC. David Ellison said that Amazon will not be able to migrate off of Oracle's system. They had a very antagonistic relationship with each other, and Oracle just said, "Hey, our systems are too difficult to migrate off of. That's a feature. That's why Oracle is so well endowed." Bezos took that as a challenge and then devoted armies of engineers just to migrating off of Oracle's systems. I had a friend who was a part of that army of engineers. It was the worst time in her life. It was very difficult to do. But we want to provide solutions that makes it easy for organizations to integrate their various data sets and not to just basically take ownership over their data, over data that those organizations should own themselves.
So if I understand correctly, centralizing the data is kind of done like at the level of an organization. It's not like the World Wide Web where sort of you're either on it or you're not, and everybody's kind of hanging out with each other. It's, within a particular organization of the government, they have data in all these different silos and they want to be able to centralize it so that different departments, people can access it more like seamlessly, or they can choose to share it with other organizations that maybe have a similar mission, something like that.
Yes. So this is the service that SetMeld is focused on. From a technical perspective, the open source work that we've done in the past and are continuing to do is focused on everything. So you as an individual could also deploy your own linked data store, and we're providing open source tools to work with that. In fact, the call that I just got off of was talking with some of my friends in Europe working on open source tools that work for everyone. But with SetMeld, we are laser focused on enterprise customers that really want to own their own data and integrate their own data, and to help them get out of the sort of pernicious data ownership ecosystem that exists today.
And if I saw you guys are employing Solid, which appears to be sort of a data architecture library that will support this centralized format for a data ecosystem, how does Solid play into this? And what is Solid?
So Solid is a set of standards that is created by by an international audience of people. You can think of it in the same way that the World Wide Web is a set of standards. So if you are working with SetMeld, you don't need to understand anything about Solid. This is the technology that is underneath the hood. That makes everything work. It's the technology that powers linked data stores. And the reason why it's important to have a standard is because now, if I have a bunch of different departments that are trying to share data with each other, that's not possible unless everything is standardized. So we employ the Solid standard, which is an open source standard, means that you're not going to be locked in to a proprietary standard for your data, finally. And it's a standard that has been developed over the course of almost a decade at this point, and has had a lot of its use cases thought through by an army of people across industry and academia. So we find it to be a very reliable standard for delivering data interoperability for our customers.
Very cool. Tell me a little bit on the business side of things, Ian. the product that you guys are working on? Is there, where are we at? Do we have an upcoming launch date? And how does like the business model work for something like this? Is this your traditional SaaS, or is it like based on the amount of data that you store, you pay a tiered amount? How are you guys thinking about approaching this?
Yeah, so the way we're thinking about approaching it is really partnering with large established enterprises. We really want to get in touch with CIOs, senior VPs of engineering who are willing to really look at a novel solution to this systematic issue. We've really been talking with a lot of different stakeholders. We had a briefing at the Pentagon recently. I talked to a CEO of a large Pennsylvania-based healthcare organization about what we could do too. But right now, we're still looking for customers. At the same time, we're actually participating in a University of Pennsylvania, Wharton, and then Perelman School of Medicine joint health tech accelerator, which will allow us to work more with the Philadelphia-based medical community and really hone in on a specific use case. We've been thinking and focusing on like immunology records and allergy records as a possible use case, but we'd really love to think about something where here's a very specific set of data silos we know that we can integrate, we know we can connect, and then from that, building out an entire IT infrastructure platform.
Sounds really innovative. I'm excited to kind of follow along with the journey and hear where you guys end up over the next, months and so on. For others who want to learn more about SetMeld and, what you guys are up to, how should they get in touch?
You can go to setmeld.com. That's SETMELD.com. Contact us there. You can also reach out to us, either of our emails. I'm jackson@setmeld.com. So if you want to contact me, you can do it there.
And I'm Ian@setmeld.com. So very easy to remember.
Yes.
Perfect. Thanks so much for your time today, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Absolutely.
That's all for today's episode of Philly Tech Connect. Join our community at phillytechentrepreneurs.com. Special thanks to our sponsor, shortlist.io, a digital marketing agency specializing in top-notch link building, content strategy, and web design. Stay innovative, Philly, and see you next time on Philly Tech Connect.